Hey, this is Michael Lindsay from Vital MX. We're out here at Paris Raceway today for the 2024 Yamaha YZ250F intro. Of course, this is the most changed 250F of the year, the one that we've been waiting for. We're ready to test, to get into, and this also means we can start shootouts here really freaking soon, so I'm very excited about it. I got my friend Luke Santos here. He split the testing duties with me today to get us a little bit broader opinion on the bike. Again, very heavily changed, but not quite as much as Yamaha's 450 last year. It will look very similar to that because the biggest updates are what you can see pretty much externally, which is an all-new chassis, bodywork, completely new airbox design, the whole 9 yards. A lot of the changes to the 250 are ergonomic-based, handling-based, and suspension-based. There's very little engine updates for what most consider to be the best overall engine in the class. There are some small tweaks there, but nothing too crazy. Even though the engine has the most minor changes, that is the most important thing in the 250 class, so that's where we're gonna start. Internally, the only change is to the cam chain. They've changed the link design, they've beefed it up, and they've changed the associated gears that operate off it, being the cam gear and the crank gear. I mean, for years now, the YZ250F in the hands of top-level amateurs and pros have had some cam chain wear issues. For most Joe Blows, most of your weekend warriors, it's not an issue. This is a durability item for them. Now, where the power has changed is due to the airbox and the air filter. This air filter is about 50% bigger. It has a larger draw. They've changed the entire boot in, again, based off the 451 from last year, albeit it's a little bit unique to the 250. And with that, they've updated all the mapping with the goal of just being able to utilize that larger amount of airflow to get a little bit more top end. You know, this bike is really good low to mid. It's the most responsive in class. It has great recovery character, great mid-range, but it tends to go a little bit flat on top, at least compared to, say, the Austrian bike. So that air change there improved that a little bit. Speaking of Austrian bikes, Luke, that's typically what you ride. Those bikes are a little bit more mid to top. Also another really good engine in the class. What'd you think on the power side of things?
Yeah, so like you said, spending a lot of time on Austrian bikes today was something I was looking forward to. So getting on the bike, I was pretty blown away right away. So like how good it is bottom to mid, but then, you know, you can ride it hard and it can still pull really long. So I did enjoy that, but I do also have to stay on top of shifting to make sure that I am riding the bike within the power and not finding myself just revving out and not going anywhere.
I think that's part of why the Yamaha 250 is, for a lot of people, it offers them a lot of recovery character in corners. It kind of helps them with mistakes. Is the gear spacing is a lot tighter on the Yamaha. Your second to your third to fourth, your fourth to fifth is laid across each other a little bit. So I think you notice you make a mistake. You can hit a corner in second, or you can hit in third, and it pulls fine third. Or you're in a faster corner, you can hit in third, you can hit in fourth, because there's a little bit overlap in the power. So you do shift it. If you're riding it aggressively, you can get it through the power pretty fast. So you do shift it a little bit more. But it's not because, to me, the power band is narrow. It's just the way they've overlapped their gears, which again, it can make it a little bit lazy. You can kind of choose the rev, you can choose the short shift. You got a couple options there. Again, I think that's why a lot of people accept this bike for what it is and really enjoy it. Big one we did, so map-wise, and we'll post in the video, we internally, the test rider here, Steven Tarkowski for Yamaha, came up with an optional map verse to try. It'll pop up here on the screen, but we tried that as an optional. It's a little bit more connected initially. Like I said, the stock power is good, but it's a little almost jerky in the ruts. It's exciting. I think most people would like that, but I like the connected one, connected feeling in that map that we tried, and it helped a little bit with over rev and just helped the bike rev up and rev down.
Yep. So, and something for me that I have to be careful with is I like exciting feeling bikes, but that's not always the best, right? So having something that's very reactive in corners might then hurt you, whereas, you know, having it be able to pull longer is better. So I did like that map and it was a lot of fun, but you make a good point. It can be a little bit too reactive sometimes to be aware of.
I think it's still fun, of course. The power tuner has a lot of options there. Something I actually didn't play with much today because 250s don't. Same as the 450 last year, there actually is a traction control system that you can arm in the map on off. Again, we're riding 250s. It wasn't really even a frame of mind thing.
Right.
The system does work really well. There's launch control settings you can do in there. You can set rev limits, a bunch of things. So again, Wi-Fi tuner app for them has just been absolutely awesome. Moving over to the biggest change on the bike, the ergos and the chassis. I'll start mostly with the ergos because they're the biggest difference to me. We said this about the 450 last year. They've really opened up the rider cockpit finally on this bike. They've lowered the foot pegs 5 millimeters, they've gone back with them 5 millimeters, and they've raised the seat 5 millimeters. So this gets you 10 millimeters larger between the peg and seat height and 5 mil back. I'm only 5'8", and I got a really short inseam. I got the legs of like a 5'5" guy. I appreciate it on the old Yamaha when I would do drop down and back pegs. So I was super excited when they did this. it makes the rider triangle more even, very Honda or Cowie-esque to me. The old Yamaha, like, felt like my knees were kind of up in my gut a lot and I was reaching over for the bars. Now it feels just very neutral.
Yep. So that's actually something that I did notice compared to the bike last year. That I felt like, obviously with the wider shrouds and stuff too, it wasn't as comfy, especially when you're cornering and trying to get your leg up. I felt like that was a little bit more of a stretch. Something I did notice though, when you mentioned the foot pegs, I actually found myself quite a few times, I'd end up standing on the foot peg mount. So that was something new for me, like I'm not used to that, and so I'd kind of almost have to adjust and make sure to like be on the pegs and not be in too tight to be standing on the mount.
Yeah, because the pegs are farther down the mount.
Yep.
For me, I'm a little bow-legged, so my toes naturally sit out on the side peg and I pinch in, so I don't notice that too much, but depending on leg structure, you might notice that a little bit. Another huge change is the bodywork. Everybody has complained forever about the wide feeling shrouds. They have gone 50 millimeters thinner this year, basically at the maximum size of the radius shroud. That's because they mostly took the air intakes out of the shrouds and they've mounted all the air pull into the top of the air box. That was, again, the huge change we saw in the 450 last year. I never was that bothered by the old 250 being big because it's a 250, you can throw it around, but now this thing feels like it's competition. It's a light, fun, flickable, playful bike. The bike is 2.7 pounds lighter than the old bike. The 450 felt like a bigger change to me last year because there was more inertia stuff involved, being that the engine's basically the same. The weight was a little noticeable, but mostly the bodywork thinning down and the seat profile changing made it feel thinner to me.
Yeah, so I felt like between my legs, the bike was very comfortable, and then there's different moments that you notice that, right? So, you know, going fast up to a jump and kind of pushing through it where the body positioning and the weight transfers forward, I feel like it's easier to move forward and back and not have as much like opening or closing, you know, and being able to transfer that body weight and still be very comfortable on the bike. So yeah, it does feel flickable and you can really like ride the bike hard and feel in control. And yeah, I mean, it was really sweet.
Last major thing to touch on is basically how the chassis and suspension work on track and some of the things we tried today. So going out there, this chassis is the 450 frame. It is to a T. The only thing is they've been able to put the 250 motor in it. It has its own dedicated set of front engine mounts. We realized this last year when we rode the 450 chassis. The old Yamaha, very comfortable, but kind of just a more flexy, comfortable chassis, not as responsive. The new one, much more responsive, a lot stiffer up at the front, has a lot better front end feel, it's a lot more connected to the ground, but there is some comfort loss there, and I would say it's a pretty even trade on the 250 chassis. I notice a little bit less comfort, but I notice a lot more of a planted feel. With that, they've tried to change the suspension to get, the bike was already on the old chassis a little pitchy on acceleration and braking. It would dive and squat and dive and squat. So they've gone quite a bit stiffer to kind of balance that out with the frame change. It was a lot better out of the package, but most of my changes were with the fork. Me and you tried a few different things. We went stiffer at first. We backed up on the stiffness a little bit. We went faster on the rebound to get to recover more under heavy braking. And then ultimately, I went from 7 millimeters on the fork out to 5. I think we're both chasing the same thing. The ruts here are pretty notchy. We were trying to just get it where it didn't load the front so hard coming into the corner and stayed a little more balanced.
Yeah, so that was my number one thing I noticed is I'd go to get into a corner and under hard braking, I would then feel like the bike would dive a little bit and then it would either lay too much or want to stand up. So the changes we made, dropping the fork down a little bit, really helped, and then end up going a little bit stiffer as well. And that was, I feel like, what kind of topped it off for me and made the bike really comfortable.
Last thing is I could go with trying to get the rear a little more settled, but the problem is I'm over the target weight goal by probably 30 pounds. You're even over it a little bit yourself. We tried a little bit stiff or softer on the high speed. It helped in places, was a little worse in others. Overall, I was mostly happy. I think the biggest change for me, the 2 mil down on the fork, I think was really good. The faster rebound, I think was better. The compression I would change depending on the track, I think, but that was the biggest difference for me, was just getting that front end up a little bit. Especially pushing the forks out to me, it just makes the bike respond a little bit slower on a corner. If it's a long rut corner, it just helped it guide through it a little bit better, where when everything was pulled up more and it had more weight on it, I felt like I would oversteer a lot in long corners.
Yeah, so there's a long sweeper here where you can almost cut in a little bit, and I noticed before we dropped the forks down, it was a lot more reactive and you couldn't quite trust it as much. And so now, dropping the forks down, it seems to be more planted down that fast straightaway, and you could trust it throughout all of that better.
So all in all, here's my wrapped up thoughts on the bike. The engine is an improvement. We didn't lose anything from the old one. We got a little bit more power up top. That's great. Yamaha engine, of course, is all around strong. The rider ergos are way better on this bike than the outgoing one. I can't really think of any rider that wouldn't appreciate the ergo changes. Now again, the positive negative is the chassis. This one does lack a little comfort from the outgoing bike, but again, it's more planted. So you might have to play with your settings a little bit to try to get some comfort, maybe a little stability out of it. But if you struggle with the old Yamahas on turning and feeling planted, you're gonna gain a lot out of this bike. So that's the only change that to me is a little up and down. I think the 250s, you can always give up a little comfort compared to the 450, so I overall like the change on the 250, but I could see how some people could struggle with it a little bit. If you have any other thoughts, comments, questions, throw them down below. Love to answer them for you guys. Hit the link in the description if you just want to read all the tech changes. I left some minor things out that I just didn't want to waste your guys' time on. I wanted to get into the feeling, so you can check that out. Hit us up for more content. Keep watching.